to see you all this morning. Thank you. And thank you for those who are tuning in online. We appreciate you being here as well. All right. I'm starting a new message series this morning. It'll be the first of 4, so this is just kind of an introductory message. One of the most important themes in the Bible is stewardship. Just this week, I actually learned that there are close to 2,350 verses that pertain to this subject of manage our resources, which not only surprised me, but it actually challenged and convicted me quite a bit, because in the last 10 years that I've been preaching, I've never really made the subject of stewardship a focus. And of course, I've talked about the need for us to steward our time, our talent, and our treasures for the purpose of glorifying God and for the benefit of others. Of course, I have. But I've never done a series on stewardship until now. And I would say my poor excuse for neglecting this very important subject is that I know that a lot of Christians equate the subject of stewardship with money. So folks go, oh man, it's budget time or something, so that's why everybody's going to be talking about stewardship right now. Or, I get that. And I never want folks to think that I'm like one of them televangelists who's just after your money, like sow a seed and all that stuff. So basically, I guess I would say out of fear, I have done all of you a disservice by not talking about what it really means to manage the God-given resources that we have been entrusted with, which is really a shame because, stewardship is about far more than what you and I put in the bucket on any given Sunday. And of course, stewardship is about money, but that's a very narrow view of stewardship. So really quickly here, I want to start here by defining what biblical stewardship is. Basically, stewardship, and I'm talking about in the context of our Christian faith, is referring to the responsibility that God has given to each and every one of us who claim to be followers of Jesus Christ to wisely manage all of the resources that he has entrusted to our care for the benefit of his kingdom, for the purpose of blessing others, and of course for his glory. Again, we often think of this as having to do with money, but it's really about how we manage and how we steward all of the resources that God has placed under your management, which includes everything that you think is yours and everything that I think is mine. This is really one of the main points of my message this morning. Do you realize that we own absolutely nothing in this life? God, according to his word, owns everything. There is nothing in this universe that does not belong to him. He says this throughout his word. Look at this, the psalmist says, Psalm 24, verses 1 and 2. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants, belong to the Lord, for he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalm 89, verse 11 communicates same thing. The psalmist is declaring about God, saying, everything in heaven and earth belongs to you. You made the world and everything in it. So like the gold and silver that you've been stocking away in your safe somewhere, or maybe the money in the bank, look at all the silver and gold, all of it, all of the silver and gold of the world is mine. God claims ownership of all the animals in the world, including that little dog you love so much and put a little coat on him and stuff, and your cat. All the animals in the forest are mine, says God, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. All the wild birds are mine, all the living things in the field. You may have killed that elk. You and your family got to benefit from the meat. Yep, and maybe you have its head mounted on your wall. It was a gift from him to provide for you a meal. God owns all of creation, everything in it, and that includes you and me. We can't even really claim ownership of our own body. Well, people don't like that. You can say, my body, my choice, all you want, and you have the freedom to say that. You can, because God has given us freedom. But at the end of the day, he says, you are not your own. You were bought with the price, so honor God with your body. That's really true. So God is the owner of all things, and we are simply caretakers. the managers and the stewards of what in all reality really is his. We are only the managers of his assets, which includes everything that is in our possession. Our time, which is borrowed, our money, our influence, our gifts, our talents, our relationships even, our abilities, it's all his. And you know, a lot of Christians are horrible stewards because they fail to grasp this very basic truth. They've mistaken, some Christians, none of y'all, but some Christians mistaken possession with ownership. Let me explain what I mean by that. There came a time when my son Rudy, he is a very good man, he's a good father, husband, good son. But there was a time when he was a little T-U-R-D. Not that being that, I can say turd. I mean, that's what he was for a while. And anyway, there was a point where he no longer wanted to submit to certain rules and expectations that Charlene and I had set for all our kiddos. And, you know, he was ready to move out from our oppressive, restrictive regime and go out on his own to be independent, bless his heart. And he was at that age where, that was right. But he wanted to move out on his own. And so he was like, so yeah, Mom and Dad, I'm going to take my TV and I'm going to take my bed to my new place this weekend. Like, oh, but baby, that's my TV. That's my bed. Those are my blankets on that bed. That pillow that's ours. See, as he was a child living under our roof, as a member of our household, yeah, we allowed him to possess those things while he was under our roof, but he didn't own them. They were our things that he had mistaken as being his own, bless his heart. And when he decided that he didn't want to live under our authority anymore, to live independently, well, we took back those things that were ours. So, that sounds mean, but that's the right way to do that. See, as God's children and members of his household, similarly, we've been entrusted to care for and to manage and to steward his things. But we often try to act like we are the owners. We want our independence on God's dime. That's really good. Somebody should hashtag and put that on a thing. And it's when we do that, when we live as managers of what is actually God's, we're going to experience conflict. Imagine, I know that some of you guys and gals, you own rental properties. I know this to be true. Imagine that you have some tenant who decides that they want to renovate your place. They want to paint it purple. Or they want to make some major renovations, and they actually move forward making those renovations. And they color it like some ridiculous color purple, okay? Well, if those changes that they make to your home don't jive with your intentions, well, there's going to be consequences and repercussions for their decision. And so it is with us if we choose to operate like owners of what actually belongs to God. There are consequences, repercussions. There's going to be conflict and tensions that are going to arise when we don't understand our role as stewards and we misappropriate the resources and assets of God in ways that don't align with his will and his wishes and his desires. And so this morning, I want to talk about a parable, a short parable, that provides us with some general principles that Jesus taught concerning good stewardship. And it's the parable of the talents, which many of you, I'm sure, are already familiar with. And again, it's a very short parable, so we'll read the whole thing, but I'm going to stop along the way to point out some things that I think are important for us to consider. It's found in Matthew chapter 5, and it starts at verse 14, where Jesus says this. He's describing the kingdom of heaven, and he says the kingdom of heaven it's like a man who's about to go on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his possessions to them. To one, he gave 5 talents. To another, he gave 2. And to another, 1. And then he went out on his journey. Okay, first of all, what's a talent? Because I think some people think this refers to our talents. You're good at sewing, you're good at knitting, or whatever the thing is. A talent is actually a measure of gold or silver, or in some cases it was liquid. But the word talent comes from this Greek word talenton, which means scale or balance. Now, in the days that Jesus walked on this earth and you'll find if you search long enough, there's a lot of people who measure this differently, but this is what I found, is that 1 talent was 58.9 kilograms worth of silver. Well, I only have GED education, so I had to Google, well, what's a kilogram? I don't even know how much that is. But so a kilogram is equal to 35 ounces. 1 kilo, 35 ounces. Okay, so 58 kilograms of silver would be, 58 kilograms would be 2,030 ounces of silver, which is, that's a lot of silver. And right now the spot price is just a little bit over $23 an ounce for silver. So in today's economy, 1 talent, 46,690, right? So these guys are entrusted with a ton of money. So if we were to read this in our modern day, with modern day figures, the parable would be like this. The kingdom of heaven is just like a man about to go on a journey, who called his own servants and entrusted his possessions to them according to each one's ability. To one he gave $233,450. To another he gave $93,380. And to another he gave $46,690. So even if the guy on the low end of the totem pole who got 1 talent, that's still a lot of, who could use $46,000? Me. So then this guy went on his journey. Okay, so that's a lot of money to put into the stewardship of his servants. As you can imagine, this was a very rare thing for a servant to be given responsibility over his master's resources, and yet that is exactly what this man does. But notice, and it's important for us to notice this, notice that he only gives to each one of his servants the number of talents that he knows they can handle. And what you're going to see as we move through this parable is that each one of these servants is going to manage his master's riches in the exact way that the master had expected him to, because he knows them. Verse 16, we see that the first servant, who was entrusted with the most riches, immediately went out and those 5 talents, and he put those 5 talents to work, and he earned 5 more. So he doubled that investment. That's good. That's a lot of money. Okay. He invested his master's treasure in such a way that he doubled it, which is exactly what a good steward does. See, a good manager, a good steward is going to protect the resources, but it's also going to expand and multiply the assets of, in this case, his master, of another. And in this case, those 5 talents that the servant was entrusted with was now worth more than $466,000. That's an excellent return on that investment. Okay, and then we're told that the second servant does the exact same thing. Second servant did the same thing, doubled his 2 talents. So both of these men right here, they took this responsibility of stewardship and management very seriously. And they, in doing so, are proving that they were worthy of the trust that their master had placed in them in giving them those talents. But the third servant does something very, very different than the first 2. Jesus says that the third servant, who had received 1 talent, went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Which maybe that doesn't sound like a big deal. Well, what's the big deal? I mean, he protected the investment, okay? But protecting his manager's assets, that's only part of his responsibility. Again, a good, faithful steward is going to protect, expand, and multiply the assets of the one who owns them. Okay, so let's look at how this plays out when the master comes home. This is picking up at verse 19. Jesus says that after a long time, the master of those servants came and he settled accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me, and look, see, I've gained you 5 more. And his master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful over a little. I will now put you in charge of much more. Enter into the joy of your master. Also, the one who had received the 2 talents came up and said, Master, you entrusted me with 2 talents, but look, now I've gained 2 more. And his master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will now put you in charge of much more. Enter into the joy of your master. So both of these servants managed and invested their master's riches in such a way that it not only served as a blessing to him, which it did, but it also resulted in them being incredibly blessed in return. Not only were they affirmed by their master as being good and faithful servants, which is an awesome thing, he also, as a reward, gave them even greater responsibility, greater opportunity, a higher position of authority to manage even more of his estate. And I think it's so interesting that the resources that the master entrusted to him, is described as being little. Let's think, 233,000 is little? 93,000 is little? If that's little, man, what does it mean to then be entrusted with much more? See, because they were faithful and good managers of their master's money, he was able to trust them with even more. Okay, but let's take a look at the third servant, beginning at verse 24. Then the servant who received 1 talent came and said, Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops that you didn't cultivate yourself. So I was afraid that I would lose your money, and so I hid it in the earth. And so look, here's your money back. Like, even though this servant was given and entrusted with the least amount of the master's money, it was still a lot of money, and he had the same opportunity as the other fellas to invest his master's money in a way that would bring him a good return. But this guy, he failed to do that. And he was given the privilege and the opportunity to manage his master's riches, but he squandered it. And even worse, if you can read into this, he's blaming his failure on his master. And his accusation here is very, very, very sharp. Look what he said again. Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops that you didn't plant, gathering crops you didn't cultivate, and so I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. He's basically accusing his master of being a harsh and even it's implied, even a lazy taskmaster who lives off the backs, the blood, the sweat, and the tears of his servants. And so out of fear, that's a result of his wrong understanding of the nature of his master, he does nothing with what was entrusted into his care, and he played it safe. And here's the master's response to this particular servant. He says to him, you wicked and lazy servant. Okay, so you knew, did you, that I reap harvests where I don't plant? And that I gather crops where I did not scatter seed? Well, man, if you believe that, well, then at least you should have had it, at least deposited my money in the bank. And I would have received it all back with interest when I returned. So, so he says, all right, anyway, like, take the talent from this guy and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have more than enough. But from the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. And here's the moral of the story. In this parable, of course, God, he is this master, and we are the servants. And we are either one of the good ones, or we are like the one who felt like his master couldn't really be trusted, and so he let his fear of his master paralyze him, and so he buried the treasure that was given to him. Really, it was for the purpose of investing it on his master's behalf. And what Jesus is trying to teach us here is that those who are wise and faithful stewards of God's resources will be given even more to manage. In serving the best interests of their master and his estate, their own blessings are multiplied. That's the principle. While on the other hand, those who don't use God's resources wisely run the risk, sadly, of having what they do have taken from them, given to others who will be faithful to steward it appropriately, the way that God intended it to be stewarded. Responsibilities, opportunities, resources, abilities, influence, and yes, of course, financial resources are given to those by God who prove that they're able to manage them in a way that is faithful and in a way that is keeping with the heart of the Father and his desires. A lot of folks often say that the Lord will not give you more than you can handle. And we often talk about that in terms of trouble and trials. That God's not going to allow you to experience more pain than what you are capable of enduring, which I don't really believe the Bible teaches that. That's another message. It would be really the context of that verse in Corinthians is talking about temptation. But anyway, because we know every day God allows, and you probably experienced this, God allows people to carry a lot more than they can handle. That's called life. Okay, but while I don't necessarily believe that principle is true in the way that we think it is, I do believe that God won't give us more than we can handle when it comes to this principle of stewardship. It's absolutely true. God does not bless us beyond our ability and our capacity to handle it. See, some folks are wondering why they can't land a job, or why they just can't seem to get that promotion that they've been seeking after, or wondering why their business won't grow and expand, or why their friend or relative has so much money and opportunity and influence when they don't even have half the education and experience that I do. Well, could it be that the reason why they're stuck and not experiencing growth in those areas, not experiencing an abundance of resources, could it be that God has only given to them, according to their ability, what he knows they can handle? They are like the one-talent servant who God knows he can't trust with his possessions. In other words, the reason why some folks don't have more than what they presently possess is because God knows that he can't trust them with more, because they'll only use it, they'll hoard it for themselves. Or they're going to use it for their own selfish desires and appetites, their own selfish gain. That's why. Because they've made the mistake of thinking that they're the owners instead of simply the managers. And for that reason, they see no increase. That's why your thing is jacked up, some of you. Because your kids don't even have no shoes, but you have this fat, free 75-inch TV. Man, that's really true. I just smoked somebody right here. None of you here, somebody watching online that's like, I'm sorry, that's true. That's why your thing is all jacked up. Okay, I'm going to continue, okay. One day, maybe even soon, the master is coming back to settle accounts with the servants who he has entrusted with his resources and assets. And each and every single one of us, including me, are either going to hear those words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Man, you utilized and invested my resources with faithfulness and integrity, and in keeping with my desires. And then there's going to be others who in the end will have proven to be an unfaithful steward, who failed to live up to the responsibility and the privilege that was given to them. And so the question is, as I'm wrapping this up now, and the question that we all need to ask ourselves and really, really be honest is, like, am I really being a good steward of what God has entrusted to me? And we have to, again, really examine our hearts, because one day we're going to give an account to our master of how we handled and managed his resources. And that requires us to sit down and examine our lives and to take stock of how and where we are using the resources that God has given to us. Charlene and I, thank you, Jesus, just recently paid off our debt. Not our school loan, which we won't pay that back until Jesus comes back, probably. He'll come back before we pay that off, or unless Papa Biden excuses it, and anyway. Okay, well, so anyway, we recently paid off our debt. And, well, that required us to really sit down and see where our money was going. And, and to be honest, man, it was sad to look at how we were spending our money, because in some cases, there was some wasteful spending. Now, some of that was intentionally wasteful. We were doing stuff like, we just want to have fun. We deserve to have fun. Okay. And then some of it, man, it flew under the radar. Things that, subscriptions to things that we didn't even know we were subscribed to, and nonsense like that, right? Things that were on our radar. That is not good stewardship. It wasn't until we finally put numbers and interest rates and payment due dates and account balances into a spreadsheet that we were finally able to manage things faithfully to the degree that now we're debt-free. Thank you, Jesus. So we need to do this same type of intentional accounting when it comes to where are we using all of the resources that God has given us the responsibility of managing. And again, this is not just about money. It's about how are you using your spiritual gifts? Are you even using them? I know some of you are not. That sounds mean, but I know a lot of folks in here, you're gifted and talented, and we're struggling. We can't have a children's ministry at 11 a.m. service because we don't have enough folk to do that. Well, that's mean. I'm just telling you the truth. I mean, how are you using your spiritual gifts and talents? I knew it was coming. Oh, come on. How are you using your influence? Some of you are in positions of authority. How are you using that for the benefit of God's kingdom? Out there in the world. And here too, within the confines of this building that we call Old Town Church. Man, how are you using all of the things that God has entrusted to your care for the benefit of investing in his kingdom and bringing him glory and being a blessing to others? Be honest with yourself. Are you taking what God has entrusted to your care and essentially burying it? Because you're afraid of what you might lose. Man, if I put money in the bucket, well, then I'm not going to have enough money for this other thing, right? Or if I invest my time in this particular ministry, serving in this ministry, well, then I'm not going to have the energy and the time that I want to do this other thing that I want to do, right? Good stewardship involves risk. There's always an element of risk in any investment, right? We know this to be true. You believe that the worth of a company is going to go up, and so you invest in that. You buy stock, based on your belief that it's going to fare well. But it could go either way. You could lose a lot of money if you invest poorly. You take a risk that doesn't pay off in the way that you hoped. See, but the difference between a business investment and an investment in the kingdom of God is that we have this wonderful promise from a good, faithful, kind master that God will supply every need of yours according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. See, those who take calculated risks and wise risks for the benefit of our master in his kingdom can be sure that they will lack absolutely nothing. A sacrifice of time and money and talent and energy made for the love of God and in service to him and for the benefit of others is always going to reap dividends. We may not see those returns here in this life, but you are guaranteed to see them when you see the master face to face and he says to you, well done, my good and faithful servant. And so, as I invite the worship team to come on up here. So, what is your time going to? Where is your money flowing? Because he always says where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. Where are you investing your energy and resources? Are you being a good steward? It's a question that we honestly have to ask ourselves. Will you finally decide today to give up ownership and recognize your place, your position, your responsibility as a manager, as a steward seriously? Because when you do that, when I do that, we will have positioned ourselves for the master to entrust us with even greater things. And that's almost all I have to say about that. We have 3 more weeks of this, so strap in, all right? All right, now we're going to take our offering. So I want you to sow a seed, all right, when that bucket comes. All right, I won't be obnoxious. We're going to take our offering at this time. And I don't know if I can do 5 weeks, but what you need to understand is, again, you don't have to give. Just like, you have the free will to give. God is not demanding that you pay. I mean, it's a blessing to give, right? And as we're reading here, we'll see in the next few weeks, there's a blessing giving, and I'm telling you, to the degree that you give, that is to the degree that you're going to receive. You give little, then you have to expect little from God. So we're going to take our offering, and then it's also a time where we're going to take communion. And we do this while you can come up at any point during the next song, and you can come up and you can take these little cups here, and there's also some in the back. And at any point, you can take that and sit seated there with whoever you're next to and just meditate on the goodness of God. Think on that sacrifice that Jesus made in order that we could experience life, and to experience life abundantly. So we take this offering. I'm just going to read something. This is King David, who understood this principle, which is why he was a man after God's own heart. This is pertaining to an offering that was going to be given. But look at how he talks. This is a man, what a good guy, what a good man. And he wasn't perfect, we know that, but look at this. There in front of the whole assembly, King David praised the Lord, and he said, Lord God of our ancestor Jacob, may you be praised forever and ever. You are great and powerful, glorious, splendid, and majestic. Everything in heaven and earth is yours. And you are king, supreme ruler of all. All riches and wealth, they come from you. You rule everything by your strength and power, and you are able to make anyone great and strong. Now, our God, we give you thanks, and we praise your glorious name. And yet my people and I, we can't even really give you anything because everything is a gift from you, and we have only given back what is yours already. That's a good heart, man, King David. All right. If you're able to stand, please do, and we're going to spend some time worshiping.